Hey everybody, Cohen or Om Gandhi here, and just wanted to wish everybody a happy new year. We are now into 2023, and what better way to start the year than with another podcast episode? Thank you all for watching, and now on to the show.
One, two, three, four.
Without further ado, perfect timing. Thank you, Dr. JoAnne Barberi, for joining us. Welcome back.
Thank you. Thanks for having me again.
Yeah, we're super excited. For those of you who are joining us on Instagram Live, you can get a lot of or all of JoAnne's articles on our website that she's written for us over the past year. She's going to continue writing for us. And this is not me pressuring her in public. She has already agreed to it. And so she's going to be writing for us this upcoming year as well. So if you have questions or topics you want us to cover, not only today, but also into the future, just use the little question mark in the bottom right-hand side of the screen there and get them in, and we'll make sure we ask JoAnne those questions, whether they are answered today or maybe in a future article. We'll get to that. So JoAnne, let's just jump right into this. You know, one of the things we believed when we launched this business was that the people will talk about the physical components for swim, bike, and run all the time, but we've always believed that the hardest muscle to train is the one that lies 6 inches between your ears, and it's so important. And one of the things you just posted about recently is, addressing your why. And so I wanted to ask you simply this: why is your why so important for athletes to know and fully comprehend?
Absolutely. So with mental fitness, I think it's first important to discuss and state that, just as we go through with any training, your day one of training is not the same as you are on day 90 or day 100, right? We're very proactive with it. We put in preventative work so that way we don't get injured and hopefully train healthy. But for the mental side, we need to be doing the same thing. So addressing our mental health, addressing our mental skills proactively is really, really important. And many times we're very reactive with it. So I think that's a really important piece to kind of bounce off what you were saying initially, Jason. But the why. Each of us, every athlete has their own why. And whatever their why is unique to them. Some athletes are very understanding of what their why is and what it stands for, and others may kind of flounder around. They might not really know, what their why truly is or what it means to them. But whys help you stay connected to your passion. They help you stay grounded, and they even help you stay present with what you're putting yourself through, what you're working towards, what you're trying to achieve. And having that why sometimes could be the little piece that helps you stay gritty or stay resilient when you would rather, hit the snooze button or sleep in more or skip that workout session or ask yourself like, well, why am I even doing this anyway? Your why helps you create that sense of drive and purpose with your training. So again, it's totally unique to each person, but it's a really critical part of anyone on any level of their training programs.
So with that being said, in terms of your why, are we or should we be developing a why for overall, a why for 12 months, and a why for a specific race? Or is one going to cover all of that?
That's another good question. So it could be that, like when I usually work with clients and we establish whys, that's one of the first things I do with them, because if I don't know what your why is, it's hard for me to help you, right? It's hard for me to help you then structure strong goal setting. So in my eyes, your why is really an overarching element that is connecting you into your sense of purpose and your drive for whatever it is that you're doing. When we then kind of have that why established, we can then break it into, all right, now how am I structuring my goal setting to help me stay connected with my why? So this is where we talk about, long-term outcome goals and shorter performance goals and process goals. But when you have that why established, those like daily action steps that you're taking account into your daily life are really like that kind of that like secret sauce, right? That is helping you stay active and staying like grinding with getting you towards that long-term goal, which is then helping you stay connected to your why.
So our co-owner, Om Gandhi, is out at Across the Years right now, running for 6 days, 144 hours. He's doing, I forget the name of the challenge, but he's got to do at least one loop every hour, you know, and so that a minimum is 144 miles if he does the whole thing.
Yeah.
So in this situation, right, so he's going to be revisiting why, I would think, very often. At least I would, because it's a 1 mile loop, and on like the very first loop, probably by my fifth step, I would ask myself, why am I out here for a mile loop? Like it just mentally, I can't comprehend that. But how often do you think that he or any of the other athletes that are going to be out there are going to be asking them this question, and how often is it going to change, right? Because if you're out there for 6 days, it's going to be changing.
Oh gosh.
Hours, right?
Yeah. And that's, I mean, that's a ultra athlete, right? So that's very different than somebody who's doing a 2-hour race or a 4-hour race, or even a 5K, you know, something shorter.
Yeah.
But regardless, right, there are going to be times of, you know, when we experience that self-doubt, that like, why am I doing this? Or what's my purpose right now? Or I'd rather be doing this instead. Or even when we get into, I don't know if you've ever done this, but like, I have to do this, I have to do that, I have to do that. Then you kind of have like a little bit of like aggression towards whatever you're working on. When we switch it more into that, like, I get to, it helps us also like associate with a sense of gratitude for what we're able to do. So hopefully for right, him connecting to his why over these next 6 days will help him find that like inner motivation that he may need, right? Because I'm pretty sure that's going to be a lot of intrinsic motivation he's going to be pulling from for those 6 days. So that could hopefully keep him, you know, motivated for staying connected to his purpose and why he's doing this.
So if an athlete recognizes that their why isn't strong enough anymore, what should they do then? Should they take time away from sport, go do something else, you know, go learn chess, go learn how to play the guitar?
Right.
Or are they going to look to like fabricate a why, which in most cases I'm going to guess isn't going to be strong enough to keep you going, whether that's at a 5K or a 5-day event?
Yeah. That's another good question. So I think it's unique for each athlete, right? Some maybe have outgrown their why, like it used to be their why, and then, you know, life changes and they come up with different goals for themselves, or just, you know, different experiences have crossed their path and now they're doing it for a different reason. Others may find that maybe they are a little bit burnt out, or that they're not connected to it anymore. It doesn't provide them that same sense of motivation. So for those, you know, that are experiencing that, maybe stepping away, resetting, refocusing, you know, sort of reflecting on, okay, what is my purpose right now? What would make me feel most fulfilled right now? And then restructuring their why would be a good idea. But we don't want to force it, right? So kind of that self-acceptance piece would be a really big part. And then you mentioned like fabricating your why. And in my eyes, I would say that's probably not the best thing to do, because it's not you, right? So it's kind of like having someone else's goal as your goal, but you're really not interested in it, but you're like, oh, they just asked me my goal, well, here it is, because that's so-and-so's goal, right? So it's not really going to be as strongly connected for you, and it's actually going to probably take you further away from achieving whatever it is you're trying to achieve.
Yeah, I would think that would be the case. You start fabricating things for your own goals, or you're looking at somebody else for inspiration and motivation, and you try to put together a training plan, it can lead to injury, right? Which then really lead to a scenario in which you're asking yourself, do I want to continue in this area?
Designed for running adventures on a variety of surfaces, the Catula Exo Spikes footwear traction are at home on ice and snow, as well as on dry, rocky ground. 12 ultra-durable tungsten carbide spikes provide an impressive amount of grip when you need it, and stand up to rocks and other abrasive trail features when you don't. Exo Spikes will inspire you to follow the trail less traveled, even when it's covered in ice. For more information, visit Catula.com.
we are at a time of the year, right, where companies are taking time off and people aren't doing much and they're relaxing. What do you see in your practice at this time of the year with athletes taking time off? What's their mental situation like? Are they getting ready to start up again because they've just finished the season? This is sort of the rest and recovery period and pick back up. And how are they managing, I guess, and we'll refer to an article that you wrote for us, the post-race blues. How are they managing those before they start moving in, and any tips you have for athletes going through that process?
Sure. So first, again, it's unique for each athlete, right? So, and this is regardless of, and I think it's important to recognize this, it's regardless of your age, regardless of your experience level, right? It's just kind of like, you never know how you're going to respond after a race or when your racing season closes. Sometimes you might be like, yes, like I need this break. I need like a month to shut it down, rejuvenate, and start back up and have that like drive to do it. And other times you might end it thinking you're going to feel that same way, and you might feel different emotions that you've never really experienced before. Some athletes will describe it as feeling like anything from like extreme sadness. Some may say they become a little bit more isolated, or they seek isolation. Some may go the other way where they get a little bit more agitated, irritable, because they're not like maybe, able to use the exercise as that stress reliever, perhaps that they used it beforehand or found that release before. Some may just worry, a lot more anxiety, a lot more nervousness of like, well, what's going to happen if I do this? What's going to happen if I take 2 weeks? What's going to happen? I'm going to lose my fitness. I'm going to lose this. And so it could stir up different emotions. So one of the big pieces is, and I say this a lot, self-awareness.
Yeah.
So, and that's hard for some, but allowing yourself to kind of sit in your emotions before you respond. So this is you just becoming in tune with yourself. So if you're noticing that, like, first of all, that first week after that season ends or after that race happens, like you're up and down, you're all over the place. You're happy, you're elated, you're sad, you're depressed. You're up here, you're down here, you're up there, right? We kind of ebb and flow naturally. But then what's happening in week 2? What's happening in week 3? What's happening thereafter, right? And how are you responding? So are these your normal emotions, your normal responses of just who you are as a person, or are these different, right? So if they are different, this is where somebody could be evaluating and wondering, like, why am I responding this way? Why am I acting this way? Why don't I want to get, maybe they usually went for training runs at 4 a.m. or 5 a.m. and now they're like hitting snooze until 6 or 7, instead of shaming themselves, maybe recognizing I might need the rest right now, right? Like it's okay to sleep in until 6, like it's all right. But in that moment, it might not make sense to them.
Right.
So self-awareness is a big piece. Having some grace for yourself is important. Easier said than done from the outside, but just kind of being okay with how you are and knowing when you might need to speak to somebody. I think that's an important piece too. So is this just something you're experiencing here and there throughout the day, or are these emotions and feelings and thoughts carrying with you for weeks, for a couple of days, consecutively in a row, where maybe they're a little heavier than quote unquote what they normally are for you, and maybe you do need to reach out and speak to somebody who can help you a little bit more professionally. So I think that's important also. Some tips in addition to that would be to, do something that maybe you've wanted to do but just didn't have time to do in the training cycle. So maybe you're into arts and crafts, maybe you play an instrument. But no, I'm not in arts, I'm not good at it. But maybe you play an instrument. Maybe you just want to go like enjoy some free time and hang out with friends here and there, during the holidays, right? And allowing yourself to do those things, or travel, or read more, like whatever it might be, but doing it without guilt is an important piece, right? Because you should be allowed to explore yourself more than you as an athlete too, which is hard to see.
You bring up, I have 2 questions in my head, and the first one is going out and hanging out with friends. Now, you talk to endurance athletes and they'll tell you, I'm running with my friends, I'm cycling with my friends, I'm swimming with my friends. And I'm sure they have friends and acquaintances outside of endurance sports as well. So how do we reconcile that scenario, right? Where we're telling ourselves, I'm swimming, biking, and running with my friends already.
Right.
Now, you're telling me to take time off to go be with friends. Well, I'm already with them. So how do we reconcile those two scenarios?
Yeah, that's a legit question, right? That's something that definitely a lot might experience. And I've even seen this with athletes who are going through, not the end of a traditional race season, but athletes who have been injured and are able to be connected with their running group or their, triathlon group. And they're struggling with that kind of like, well, how do I still stay connected to them? So, it depends. Are they all in the same spot of their training cycle that you are? Right? Or maybe you can match up with people who are similar to you in their training cycle. During this downtime, it doesn't necessarily mean that you shouldn't be active or that you shouldn't be, keeping up with running or swimming or cycling, but maybe you're doing it to a lesser volume, a lesser intensity. So perhaps you could, link up with those athletes in your group that are kind of, again, on that same page as you and socialize that way if you're still connecting, in the group. Or if these really are also your true friends that you want to spend time outside of the group with, seeing if maybe there's something that they would want to do, away from the group, whatever it might be, just to hang out and socialize in another way. So again, that guilt piece is important because, or that shame, I guess we should also say, that shame piece of like, oh, I should be doing this because, oh, I see my friends just posted a picture. They all went for their like 10-mile loop today and I did not, instead of having that like intense vulnerability or shame follow us, instead be like, but that's okay because, I'm in my down phase right now and that's all right. I'm going to meet up with so-and-so instead afterwards, and do whatever. So I think that's a big internal struggle some could face.
So the shame and the social media component of seeing the pictures may be the answer to this question, right? Where you mentioned earlier, right? Instead of getting up at 4 or 5 a.m. for your run, hit snooze, get up at 7 or 8 a.m. When we sleep in, right, we feel better. I know people will tell you, oh, I feel more tired when I get more sleep. I don't, nonsense, right? Better when we sleep more.
Yeah.
Is it the idea that shame and seeing pictures from other people who have gone out and run at 5 a.m. sort of prevent us, so to speak, from hitting that snooze button?
Social media is powerful. I mean, I think a lot, and I think it's just getting, more and more powerful that we're even comparing ourselves with people that we've never met, right? That are like, oh, like if they're dead, and then you're like, who am I following? Like, wait a minute, who's this person?
Yeah.
Right? They live in a sunny, warm place, but it's like -7 degrees right now. I mean, so, but yeah, I think that definitely who we're following, but also what we're allowing to hold value. And that just adds into our own identity, that adds into our own self-worth too. So some people may use it as a form of like healthy, quote unquote, competition, even though the other person doesn't know you're competing with them, right? Where it's like, oh, they're getting up at 5, I'm getting up at 5, right? And they're posting their selfie, I'm posting my selfie, right? And maybe that's a form of motivation for you. That's an external motivator, right? But when maybe you're questioning that, oh, I slept in, and then I look at my feed and all these people have done these morning runs and whatever. Some people, I may be guilty of this, will just like throw up their hat. Well, the day's over. It's 7 a.m. I missed out. Like, forget it. Now I don't know what to do. And I text my coach, this is it. We're done. But it's not, right? It's not over. So why is that piece so valuable to some athletes? And others won't blink an eye. They're like, I needed that. I needed that extra sleep. It's only 7 a.m. Let's go, right? Or I'll do it in the evening or in the afternoon. And they're able to, adjust a little bit better. So it's really where they hold that sense of worth or like self-worth or, who they think might be checking in on them, right? At that point in time where we kind of think that we have to have this picture perfect, output, right? Instead of just realistic, like missed that run today or overslept, right? Or I needed it, right? But like you said, sleep is a humongous pillar in performance. And most people are not getting the sleep that they need in order to be able to perform well physically as well as mentally too.
Yeah, it's funny, interesting, crazy, mind-blowing that you won't sleep in because you got to make sure that your Strava is updated with a run at 5 a.m. But you're going to get more benefit if you slept in
Right.
the same run an hour or two later. The distance is going to be the same. The health benefit is actually going to be better because you slept. Nowadays I sleep in. I used to be the person who was up at 4 a.m., get the run in. Nowadays I sleep in, and I live in Phoenix. If it's 110 degrees at 7 a.m., you know what I do? I go to the treadmill.
Yeah.
And then, hey, use the tools that you have in your toolbox.
Yeah.
To make better. Why are we so afraid to make those changes, right? Oh, it's 7 a.m. and it's 110 degrees outside. I'll go to the treadmill versus, oh, I slept in at 7 a.m. to your point, throw my hat up, text my coach, I missed my run, I'm not doing it.
Yeah.
Why do we not address the situation and use the tools that we have in our toolbox? Is it because we have some belief that you can only do a run outside or whatever it might be?
I mean, and I think that's a lot of the athlete's own perception of, what they feel quote unquote qualifies as like a strong workout or a good workout. Or if I've been doing all my runs outside and now I take this one on the treadmill because it's 110 degrees, is that going to throw off my output? Because maybe you run differently on the treadmill than outdoors. But in the end, when you reflect backwards, what did that one workout do? Probably nothing drastically to your training. But in that moment, many times it's because of that element too of you're a little bit out of control at that time. So even going back to sleeping in, and I just kind of thought of this as you were talking, but if we're not planning to sleep in, say until 7, right? And we have that alarm set for, 5 a.m. and we hit the snooze or we turn off the alarm and forget we turned it off, right? And all of a sudden we wake up and we're like, oh my God, it's 7, right? We're not on a routine. We're not on our schedule. We feel out of control. And when we feel out of control, that's when usually our emotions go haywire. We do become more anxious. We do become more worried. We're racing around mentally and physically. So it's kind of like we've offset everything, even though, again, realistically, we probably haven't changed much, right? We can still get it done. Just has to adjust a little bit.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
So for those of you who are watching, full disclaimer, JoAnne is an athlete with the No Limits Endurance coaching team. I am a coach with the No Limits Endurance coaching team. But so when I get athletes that talk to me about I can't run on the treadmill, so to speak, I always remind them, and a lot of people that are coming into the sports today don't know who I'm about to mention, but Andy Potts was one of the top pro triathletes for a number of years. He did no training on the bike outdoors. He only rode on the indoors on the trainer because for him, he had more control of power and a whole bunch of different things, plus safety, right? And so when I hear athletes that are like, I can't run on a treadmill or I can't ride my trainer, is it because the outside perception is somebody might think that's not real running, that's not real cycling?
Yeah, I could be. I saw something the other day where I'm in New Jersey, and we had right around Christmas Eve. I'm saying last week, it was only a couple days ago. It feels like last week. It was freezing. I think the real feel Christmas Eve morning where I was at 6 a.m. was -7 degrees. I mean, that's cool. And people were I saw just in my scrolling through, what do I do? Do I go outside? Do I stay on the treadmill? And I'm like, I'm going on the treadmill. I'm putting on Netflix. I'm watching a movie. But I saw somebody else post something I hate to tell you, but a run on the treadmill is the same as your run outside. And I was like, yes, right? So is it perception? It could be, because who really knows? Who's really following you? But that, again, is that social media, which is so great. I mean, we have businesses that are, supported and boosted through social media, but we need to be balanced with it and realize that it is that, we post the picture perfect world most of the time, even though realistically, most of the days are not picture perfect. And that's hard for a lot of people to swallow and understand, right? So yeah, I think some may worry about that outside perception, right? am I chickening out? Like, am I not as tough if I take this on the treadmill or train indoors instead of, braving the elements of the unknown outside? So
Well, I ask my athletes when I work with them, and this conversation comes up is, do you remember what Bob did last week? And they're like, no. And I'm like, they're not going to remember what you did last week either. Get on
right.
the treadmill. It's okay. Like, we use the phrase, right? We live in a world in which, it's a 24-hour news cycle, if not shorter. So if you run on the treadmill and you're worried about the perception that somebody's going to see that you ran on the treadmill, in 24 hours, they're going to have forgotten it anyway. So don't worry about it so much.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
So for a different topic and getting back to sort of the mental side of it too, for myself personally. So I told you when we were in the green room that when I started running 100-milers, I ran and raced at Rocky Raccoon in Huntsville, Texas. And I set a goal for breaking 19 hours. And the fastest I ever went was 19:11, something around that area. That was 4 or 5 years ago. I just turned 49 a couple of weeks ago. I don't live in Texas anymore. I live in the mountains. And so the idea of breaking a 19-hour mark and breaking 19:11 as a PR seems to be gone at this point, right? And I was wondering and keep wondering about this and I wrote the question down. So do we ever know when we have reached our best? And if we know that we do, how do we address it? Do we say to ourselves, hey, for me, I go, hey man, you ran a 100-miler in 9 hours and 11 minutes. That's awesome. Fantastic. Pat on the back. But some people are going to go, yeah, but I never broke 19 hours. Disappointed in having run 19:11. So do we ever know when we have reached our best?
That's another good question. So I think that, our best, right, is really each athlete's own perception. And that is very goal driven. Some are very specific what times they want to break, with what race they want to break them in, where they want to PR, what age group they want to get. And that's how they evaluate success, right? And if they don't make those times, get that placement or whatever, they could still have their best race of their life. But if they don't hit that metric or that milestone, to them, that race might just be like, that was a horrible experience. That was the worst one I've ever done, because I didn't make what I wanted to make. For them, that's realistic. That's true to them, right? We're not there to judge how they're feeling, but that tells me a lot. Like, okay, this person is very outcome driven on what they are focused on. For another person's best, it could be, doing a race of whatever distance it might be, and recognizing that maybe this race isn't going to be time-based, or maybe it's not going to be the pace I wanted to get, or maybe I don't care what age group I get or placement. I just want to finish the thing and finish it feeling healthy, feeling strong, whatever it might be. So to them, that could be their best, right? So again, kind of like what we were talking about before, I think when we consider the perception that we all have, are we allowing those external voices, those external factors, are they weighing in on how we're viewing our best? Like, do we think, kind of like you said, what did Bob do last week, right? Are we worried about how our best is comparing to somebody else's best, when realistically we are not the same people, even though we might be doing the same event? And that is something that is hard for some people to swallow, and then easy for other people to be like, that's fine. Like, I'm still doing that 100-mile race, right? And I'm okay with the time I get because it's for me. That also connects what we talked about initially in the call of what's your why? So what is your purpose? What is your drive? Is it, again, very outcome driven, that you want boom, 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 because maybe you want to qualify for Kona, or you want to qualify for something, further, where you do need to have, or like Boston, right, where you do need a certain time or whatever. Maybe that's not your goal. So, whatever that why is going to help dictate and drive you into understanding what your best is, in that moment in your life too.
I think that phrase right there, in the moment, right, is focus on. So I'll be racing the Canyons 100 at the end of April, which is in large part run on the Western States course, which I have done. It runs backwards, basically.
Okay.
But for the moment, right, my goal is to break 20, I think I finished Western States in 27:56. So to break 28 hours, plus the opportunity to get stones to enter the UTMB lottery and get a Western States ticket just for finishing, right, in that scenario, in the time allotted. So in the moment, that's what I'm looking at is to be my best versus, again, it's a totally different course, totally different terrain. Everything is different. And I'm 3 or 4 years older at this point, trying to break 19 hours, right? I just don't I have to focus on the here and now and be present today versus the person I was in the past, which brings up another question for me. In your mind, how detrimental or how positive of an influence have sites like Ultra Sign Up that has all of your results, or Athlinks that has all of your results, or a Strava account, right? Are they more detrimental to athletes? Are they more positive? And I know the answer is it depends on who the athlete is.
Yeah.
For your opinion on it, and what do you see from it?
I think that it's important to reflect, right? It's important to see your growth. It's important to see your progress. But if you're looking at today compared to 3 years ago, or compared to 2 years ago, or even a year ago, you have changed, right? You've adjusted, and maybe you got stronger and faster and quicker, or maybe it went the other way a little bit. But there's so many variables that could happen in that span of time, like illness, injury, just, taking extra time off or training too hard and burning out. Like there's so many, variables that could add into your response that I think that's when it does a disservice. Like, oh, look at where I was, 12 months ago. Look at where I was even 6 months ago. Instead of being like, this is valid, right? This is me. I mean, it's still me, right. But it's really doing you, in my eyes, a disservice to look that far back and be like, well, the last time I ran this race, which was, 3 years ago, this is where I was. And I'll share, I know Jason knows this, but 3 years ago, I was diagnosed with cancer very unexpectedly. And I'm all good now. But I had to get surgery 2 days after running the 2019 Philly Marathon. So that whole marathon was very tainted for me. It wasn't there for me. But I was doing it, and it was done, and it was just like blacked out of my mind, kind of. And this year I decided to celebrate 3 years cancer-free. I was doing it again. And I went through a lot of struggles. Like even my coach that I have through No Limits, there were some days when one day I finally said, I don't care about my time. Like I really just don't care. I don't care. Like I don't care right now because I'm not who I was 3 years ago when I was trying to focus on time, was trying to focus on a specific pace. My body has changed. I'm doing this for a very different reason than I was prior. So I had to really work on grace and acceptance. And I still struggle with that, but it was a big piece of me accepting my finish in the Philly Marathon this year because it was the slowest I've ever run, but I had fun. Like I kind of was just like, hey, like I'm going to look over here today, and I mean, whereas normally I probably wouldn't have done that, but I was allowing myself to like walk through the water station, like if I wanted to, and being okay with it. And I think that was the biggest piece, just being okay with where I was today, knowing that I was not the same as I was 3 years ago. So that was a big learning experience for me.
Yeah. And so for those of you who are watching this or soon to listen to this on our podcast when we upload it, like if you're just starting in these sports, just understand that at some point those events will have happened 3 years ago, 6 years ago. I've been doing this stuff for 15 years, right? So to go back on like athlinks.com to look at my first half marathon from 15 years ago, it honestly is pointless.
Yeah.
Right? Maybe it's good to go back and look at it and be like, oh, I remember that day and I remember, why I got into these sports to begin with. But to compare myself to 15 years ago, I was 34 years old, 35 years old, to compare myself to 35-year-old Jason is absurd, right? Life has changed who knows how many times over since then. To go back and look at that, it's totally different. And I think I go back to the idea, to your point of, again, even 3 years ago, the world is different, and you, especially because 3 years ago, you're talking about heading into the pandemic.
Yeah.
And life changed for everybody at that point, right? And so looking back on those things, I think you have to, when you open up those websites, understand, for me, and please correct me if I'm wrong, but understand that that's a part of your history. That's not who you are today.
Yes, I agree with that.
I think it just, and I wonder how often people fall backwards and go, oh, I used to run a half marathon in whatever, one whatever, two whatever, and use that as a basis of comparison, sort of, instead of goal orienting and progressing this way, start going in the other direction, because they're always like, I'm not running the pace that I did 3 years ago. If we're doing that, how do we pull ourselves out of that rut? Is there a way to pull ourselves out of that?
Yeah. So the first thing is to start listening to how my suggestion would be listen to how you're describing or talking to yourself about it. So that way you can start thought stopping. Because sometimes it just, I don't know about you, but like all of a sudden you're like wrapped up in it. You're like, oh, wait a minute. Like, what was I doing 5 years ago today? You know? And, or how many miles did I run last year? And, oh, why didn't I get that amount this year? I thought I was going to run more, you know? But to really recognize, right? The first piece is to recognize when you're going down that track, so that way you can stop and kind of adapt, right? You want to stop and reflect of like, is this helping me right now as an athlete, or is this hurting me more now? And if you're finding that it's helping you, then, you know, continue with it. But if it's not helping you and you're walking away from that, you know, scroll, feeling more anxious or being like, man, why am I putting in all this work if I'm nowhere near I was, you know, 3 years ago? Am I going to make that time this time around? But, right? Then it might not be the healthiest thing for you to be doing, right? Or to allow yourself 5 minutes, right? Like I get to check it out. Oh, did we freeze?
You froze for a second there.
I froze. Am I back?
Yeah.
I was saying, and, you know, like kind of monitoring, like, all right, I get 5 minutes to scroll through, but I'm not judging myself. I'm just seeing the stats because they were valid, and then I'm moving forward. Yeah. I've also found, to kind of bounce off of this, when people say, I'm just running the half, or I'm just doing the 10K, you know, I don't know if you've noticed that, but that's something that I've had to stop some people and be like, why is it just?
It pisses,
right? Like,
it pisses me off when people say, I just ran this or I just ran that.
Right.
There's, honestly, as a coach, as an athlete, as a mentor, and as an owner of this business, we see and hear that phrase so much, and it drives me nuts. Yeah. And I always give them this example, because a lot of times it's, I just ran a 5K. And I always tell them, I go, do you know how many 5Ks I've run in the last 5 years? And they're like, must be dozens. I'm like, 0. And they're like, really? Why? And I go, because they hurt me. Like, I don't enjoy 5Ks.
Yeah.
Like, they hurt. Put me in the mountains for 100 miles, I'm happy. Yeah. But I run 5Ks because they hurt. And so it's not just a 5K. You're doing something that is, you know, pedal to the metal, 0 to 60, and holding for 3.1 miles. I don't enjoy it. I don't do it. It hurts. Yeah. So it's not just a 5K. Yeah. And it's not just any of this stuff, right? I think that phrase, it drives me nuts.
Right. I agree. And that's where, but I think we're all guilty of it at some point in time, right? So it's kind of recognizing, like, when we catch ourselves saying, I'm just doing such and stuff, instead of, it's like, that's where that thought stopping is like, no, like, you are doing this, and this is just as valid as somebody doing a full marathon or doing the 100-miler or doing a 10K, right? Like, because it's for you. And I think that's what's so unique about endurance athletes, is that really it's for you, right? It's really for your fulfillment, or your why as to why you're doing it.
Yeah, I think it's all up in the perspective of it all, right? You know, people will see that I race 100-mile distances, and do it because I love it. Mm-hmm. And so ask them, what distance do you love to race? Not the distance that you see somebody else doing, or the distance you want to get to, because progress is fine. But what do you love? And go test out the longer distance. If you enjoy it, great. If you don't enjoy it, stop doing it. It's okay, right? We have very short memories. People will forget if you attempted the Ironman and didn't enjoy it after your first one. And you're like, I'm never doing one again. That's okay.
Yeah.
Like, people won't remember that you did one. Like, nobody's running around going, hey, Bob only did one, by the way, right?
Right.
I think it's just all perspective. And do you have, and we're going to wrap this up here in a second before we get into the rapid fire. Do you have any tips or any ways for people to reframe and put their successes and failures, for that matter, into perspective?
Definitely. So with reframing, it's really thinking about how can you restructure your thought process, or restructure the words that you're saying to yourself in a positive way. And again, and I said this, like, I feel like 5 times already, so I'm sorry for repeating, but you need to first understand what you're saying, or what the thoughts are. So if you're not at that spot yet, like, that's step 1. Like, you want to enhance the awareness piece, and then start to pick up on, when do you notice this occurring? Is it when you're hanging out with, a certain group of friends, or after you're mindlessly scrolling for 55 minutes on social media, and then you're like, like, I should have been doing that, but what is kind of that catalyst that gets you into that frame? So that's an important part. Once you're able to understand, like, what that stimuli is that causes you to click on this thought process, then understand, like, you can switch your wording into something more positive. It just requires you to take action. So one thing I like to tell my clients and athletes I work with is to use what's known as the stop technique. So you'll literally visualize a stop sign. And when you hear that phrase, or notice yourself talking in that negative way, or that self-doubt way, you want to kind of, like, see the stop sign pop up. And then it's an acronym. So the first thing you're going to do is literally say to yourself, like, stop, like, stop what you're doing, because that increases awareness, as silly as it sounds. For the T, you're going to take a couple deep breaths. It can be 2, 3, 5, doesn't have to be anything long. When we take controlled breaths, we're actually taking ownership of an element in our life that is usually very involuntary, right? So we breathe without thinking about it. But when we take control over it, it helps us to really become present into ourselves. Then you're going to, for the O, you're going to observe what's happening. So how has that thought process or that self-doubt made you feel psychologically? How has it made you feel physically? And how has it made you feel behaviorally? So you might notice that you're feeling anxious, or that, like, your mind's going a mile a minute. You might be biting your lip, or popping gum, or twirling your hair, or whatever you might do when you're nervous or anxious. You may notice that you are worried about something, right? But just observe it, and you're observing it non-judgmentally. You're not questioning yourself. You're just observing, and then you're going to move forward. So for the P, you're proceeding. You're moving forward from that moment. So that whole process doesn't have to be long. It can be 30 seconds. It could be 15 seconds. It could be 3 minutes, but it's not meant to be like a whole hour of self-reflection. It's just for you to catch it happening and sort of stopping the cycle before it carries forward into a bigger, like, downward spiral of how we might be, experiencing those thoughts.
Awesome. That's great. That's a great acronym, STOP. JoAnne, thank you so much for joining us. We're going to get into some rapid fire questions, but tell the audience where they can find you and how they can reach you.
Oh, absolutely. So thank you for having me. You can reach me. My Instagram is at absolute_fitness_performance. Or you can email me at absolutefitnessllc@gmail.com. And Instagram is usually where I house most of my information. And then I have a link tree there with just information about, mental health, mental skills work, as well as services that I provide. So that would be the best way to contact me.
Awesome. Since you were already on our show once already, a lot of the questions we asked you, I will not ask you again, okay. But I was just in New York City. And so a lot of these are going to revolve around being in New York City.
Oh.
So when it comes to, are you a cheesecake fan?
like cheesecake. I guess.
Do you like New York cheesecake or Italian cheesecake?
I am Italian, so I would have to side with Italian cheesecake.
So you like the softer one versus the harder
Yes.
New York cheesecake? Let's see where we go from here. Pizza. Are you going to order a slice or are you going to order a Sicilian?
A slice.
Very good. Now, if you were to order Sicilian, which portion of the Sicilian pie are you ordering?
The corner.
Got to get the corner, right?
That's it.
Like arm wrestle. I will have arm wrestled my grandmother for the slice of the Sicilian, without a doubt.
Yes, always the corner.
Have you had Detroit style pizza?
No.
So it's like Sicilian pizza, but they put cheese on the outer edge of the crust so that when it melts, it gets crispy.
Oh.
And really want to arm wrestle grandma. Gonna get more cheese there too. So cannolis. When it comes to cannolis, favorite flavor? Are you gonna have pistachio? Are you gonna have chocolate chip? Are you gonna go plain?
Chocolate chip.
Chocolate chip.
Yes.
Now, are you the shell dipped in chocolate or just the regular plain shell?
Just the regular shell with the powdered sugar on top.
Nice.
Yes.
Favorite pasta dish? If you're Italian, you gotta have one favorite pasta dish.
I know. I just like, I'm very plain with my pasta. So I just like when it's the really good spaghetti with my mom's like homemade sauce.
Meatballs?
Meatballs on the side if I have them. Yeah. they go to the side of my pasta.
So Italian, meatballs on the side. Put it on my pasta. I'll put my fork in it.
Because you have to twirl your pasta. That's what I do. I twirl it with the spoon.
Crunchy bread, right?
Only the ends.
So are you putting butter on it or oil with balsamic?
Oil. I'm more oil. Yes.
So on an endurance sports scenario, do you have a goal race in mind? Is there a race that you're like, I really would love to do this one day?
Well, I am doing the Disney half in a couple weeks. And that's something that I've wanted to do. I did the full, like in, gosh, I guess it was like 2006. And now that I have kids, I've always wanted to go back. But my coach talked me off the ledge of doing a full and bringing 4 kids to Disney World and then expecting to travel with them. So I was like, all right, Alexa, I'll do the half. And now I'm so happy that she talked me off that ledge. So that's something that I've been wanting to do. So I'm really excited about that. And I don't know. I filled out my goal setting sheet for Alexa today for No Limits. And I actually put on there, I need to talk to you because I need to really see a bigger picture of what is available for me outside of New Jersey and Philly and like this area, because I feel like I'm ready to explore.
Shout out to Alexa Boyce at No Endurance Coaching. She's a fantastic woman. So if you're looking for a coach and you don't want to work with me, you go to Alexa. It's been 12 months this whole year. What's the favorite book that you've read this year? Favorite movie, favorite TV show, favorite piece of entertainment from the past 12 months?
I like The Office. So I drive an hour to and from work. So 2 hours round trip for my full-time job. And I've been listening to the Office Lady podcast.
Okay.
And it's been making me rewatch The Office. And it just makes me laugh because it's mindless, but it's like, oh, I never noticed that. So for me, at the end of the day, like, that's what I want, something completely mindless. But I do want to watch Yellowstone. That's on my, like, next to-do list is watching Yellowstone because I heard really good things about it.
So we just got joined by Dilip, who I don't know if you saw the interview we did with him, JoAnne. So you want to talk about mental strength. He, I believe, just finished running at the South Pole. He's climbed Everest. Like, the dude has done some amazing stuff. And thank you, Dilip, for joining us. Congratulations on your accomplishment last week. Amazing, amazing stuff. But you can find his story on our Instagram Live. JoAnne, thank you so much for joining us. We look forward to reading your articles on our website and our digital magazine this upcoming year in 2023. Happy New Year to you. And again, thank you for joining us. We appreciate your time.
Absolutely. Thank you for having me and Happy New Year.
Thanks, everybody, for joining us. We'll see you next Tuesday. Have a good one. Bye-bye.